Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, where we discuss all of the fabulous and wonderful news in the wide world of baseball. My name is Ben Brown. Jeremiah is out of the studio again today. Last week he was on vacation with the holiday, with Thanksgiving. He was back in his hometown of Fresno. But this week he's just feeling kind of under the weather as we record right now, so he's actually not in the studio. So once again, it will be just myself on the baseball show. Jeremiah hopefully will be back next week. He's a guy who's not normally missing a lot of time, so I would imagine he would be back in the studio next week to record with me, talking a lot of baseball news. But without Jeremiah here, it will just be myself, as I mentioned. So we'll be talking about a few things, primarily talking about a certain player for the New York Mets that has a new deal, a big deal that was reported yesterday. Talk about that in the first segment. After our break, we will be talking about the collective bargaining agreement, the players' union, and the owners. The deal expires at midnight Eastern time tonight, so we are literally just under 12 hours away from not having a deal in place, but there is progress on the deal, so we will talk about that and what sort of the circumstances are, what it would mean for everybody, winter meetings getting scheduled next week, what that would mean for those. So we'll kind of update on everything about the CBA and kind of what's going on, because it hasn't really been talked about much in the general media, but I feel like it's very important, and it's, like I said, it's expiring tonight, so we got to find a way to get this thing done. So hopefully we will, being really optimistic. Reports are, like I said, that they are progressing, so we'll have to wait and see, but I'll update you on what's going on, what it would mean, what sort of the circumstances are. After that, we'll sort of do some quick updates. We had a few more free agent moves, certain players going to the Cubs, the A's, the Brewers. And then we also have our comeback player of the year announced in the American League and the National League. A certain familiar face in the American League. Kind of the last of our awards from last year, although the comeback player of the year is not necessarily looked at as one of the big ones. We still are going to be talking about it. So anyways, we'll start right off with the deal that I mentioned at the beginning of the segment. And that is Yoenis Cespedes. He has re-signed with the Mets after opting out this year to become a free agent. He's not going anywhere. He's staying at Citi Field with the New York Mets. He signs a 4-year, $110 million deal yesterday. He will have a no-trade clause. He'll make about $22.5 million this year, which is a little lower than what he did last year, $27.5 million. But after a couple of years, he'll be making a lot more. So in 2018, he'll get $29 million. And in 2020 and 2019, he'll get $29.5 million. So he is getting a bump in his pay over the years, not necessarily on a 1-year deal, but a 4-year deal. This is going to be his deal. So he's going to be getting a bump throughout the 4 years. Last year, Cespedes, at the age of 31, hit .280, and he led the Mets with home runs at 31 and RBIs at 86. And this was during a year last year where he missed some time. Around the All-Star break, he missed some time with a quad injury. He wasn't healthy all year, and he had really one of his best seasons statistically from the standpoint of swinging the bat. So you got to imagine if he can stay healthy next year, he can do a lot better. He's doing this at Citi Field, which is not even a hitter's ballpark. It's a pitcher's ballpark. So his stats could be even a lot better had he been playing somewhere like Colorado, or really anywhere that was not with a ballpark that was so big, you know what I mean? So he still had a really good year, and really, like I said, he's one of the best outfielders out there, one of the best hitting outfielders out there. And for the Mets, this is an absolutely huge deal. They needed to keep him. Since his debut with the Mets, which was on August 1st, 2015, after the trade with the Tigers and everything, He has led the team, really, and the Mets as a whole with their pitching staff too. But with him in the lineup, they have gone 106 and 74. And when he's not in the lineup, they're 18 and 23. So I realize not everything there is credited to Cespedes. It's not like that one guy makes up that big of a difference, but he makes up an absolutely huge difference. So with Cespedes in the lineup, the Mets have also averaged 4.6 runs per game compared to him not being in the lineup just at 4. So he's capable of obviously increasing their run production by about half of a run a game over the last couple of years. So he's very, very important. And nevertheless, this is a deal that the Mets absolutely had to make. Although they are having to pay Cespedes a lot of money. They're paying him $110 million for 4 years. That's a lot of money. This is a deal they had to make. There's not that many big-name outfielders in the free agent market this year. I guess you can say Jose Bautista, but he's 38. Cespedes is 31. So you have a 7-year difference there. Also, you signed him to only a 4-year deal. You don't have the Albert Pujols, the Alex Rodriguez kind of contract where you're paying him into his early 40s where there may not be any production left. You're paying him until he's only 35 years old. So if the first couple of years he does pretty good, maybe the last 2 years he kind of struggles a little bit, you're not having to pay him for a whole lot of time. It's just 4 years. So you got to say that's a pretty good deal. He's literally their best hitter, so he provides a lot to the table. He's capable of hitting it out of the park anytime he steps up to the plate. He's got a cannon out in the outfield, so he can get runners out there trying to score if the ball obviously goes out to the field. So he's very, very important. When you look at the Mets, really last year, their only problem is that they were injured all year. You look at their starting pitching primarily. You have Matt Harvey, you have Jacob deGrom, Steven Matz, all of them missed time. Noah Syndergaard had like a bone chip in his elbow, so he wasn't necessarily 100% all year long, although he didn't go to the DL for long stretches like these other guys, including Cespedes as well. So if the Mets can kind of get their pitching staff healthy, which, looking at last year, I don't think it can get any worse. You keep Yoenis Cespedes healthy. You still have Curtis Granderson and Jay Bruce out there. Reports are that they might be looking to trade one of those guys, maybe Granderson, more so than Bruce. So you still have a good, solid outfield, and you're still a good team. This is a team with all the injuries that I mentioned, still hosted the wild card game, although they lost to the Giants. 2 years ago, they were in the World Series. It's still a very good team with a young pitching core, and now you have Cespedes to build around in the outfield. The one downfall here is that you spent a lot of money, $110 million. So depending on what ownership and what the GM want to do with the rest of free agency, you may not have that much money to pay anybody else. The Mets still have a lot of glaring needs. They could use a ton of infielders. You can always add more pitching. You can always add people to the bullpen. But for me, this is a win-win for both parties. Cespedes opts out, which we kind of thought was a little crazy. He opts out of a 3-year, $75 million deal, which, I mean, I guess you can say he kind of did it for a good reason here. He gets a longer deal. But to even think about doing that is kind of shocking. And also the Mets get to keep him around. So Cespedes gets his money. The Mets keep him. Like I said, it's a win-win for both parties, and you can't really hate on that for there. Cespedes has been a great player. This is his second year. Last year was his second year hitting 30-plus home runs, and he did that in an injury-shortened year. So you got to think if he can stay healthy. He hit 35 a couple of years back. That's his career high. You can probably stretch that depending on if people get on base or not. He can probably reach the 100 RBI plateau. He hit 280, so it's not like he's just hitting for power and not hitting for contact. 280 is not a terrible average. So you got to say that I guess it was really, really warrant and out there to play left field, maybe right field if the instance comes. It's a good deal for Cespedes and for the Mets. All right, guys, we'll take our first break at the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. After the break, going to be talking about a quick update on the collective bargaining agreement, which is set to expire at midnight tonight. So it's very, very important within these last few hours that they can try and negotiate at least something That way we don't have to worry about a lockout. But we'll talk about what details are going into that and what the progress is right after the break at the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Thank you for returning back to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. As I mentioned, the CBA in Major League Baseball, the collective bargaining agreement, is set to expire tonight at midnight Eastern Time, so about 11 and a half hours. It is going to expire as I speak to you right now. As I mentioned, though, there is a little bit of things to be optimistic about, and that is progress is being made in the labor talks. Although it is a small progress, and today is the last day for the deal. So you got to imagine that with about 11 hours left until the deal expires, obviously they're not going to be meeting for 11 hours in Dallas, Texas, where they're holding these sort of talks and everything, that they're not going to get a deal specifically put into place so they can vote within tonight to vote on the new CBA. But I guess some progress is better than no progress. The one big sort of hurdle or one big thing for the sides to agree on is the competitive balance tax. It's basically something to try and even up the playing field. So in baseball, as you know, there's not necessarily a salary cap like there is in football or in basketball that says you can spend X amount of dollars on your roster. In baseball, you can spend whatever the heck you want on your players. But if you go over a certain amount of money, then you have to pay more, kind of like a luxury tax. That way you can kind of even the playing field a little bit, because some teams like the Yankees, like the Cubs, the Red Sox, they have a lot more money to spend on players than the Tampa Bay Rays do or the Oakland A's. You know what I mean? So it's kind of a penalty tax to try and even the playing field, to say, hey, if you go above this number, you're going to have to spend X amount of dollars on certain things on your salary cap, as opposed to if you stay at this number, you're not going to have to spend any more money. So for teams that have a lot of money, it's not really a big issue, but it might influence you just a little bit to be a little bit more cautious on how much money you spend on free agents and re-signing the guys you currently have under contract. So that's the one last thing they kind of have to sort of agree on, is exactly where is that going to sit? Like, where is that cap going to be put at? So they're kind of still, that's like the last big sort of hurdle to go through, but there's still a lot of things. So when you break this deal down, what exactly happens? So if they don't get a deal put in place tonight, they could maybe stretch it out, extend the deal maybe a day or two, maybe for a week. That way it gives them a little bit more time to negotiate. That's what I think is going to happen. I don't think they're going to say, oh, midnight, we're locked out. You know, nothing's put into place. We're done talking. We're locked out right now. Everything's done. I think they'll try and put a little bit of a placeholder, like another week, because if they don't do that and everything gets locked out, what exactly does that mean? I realize we're about 3 or 4 months away from the season now, but that means there's a lockout. So that means you can't sign any free agents, you can't make any trades, you can't do anything. Literally, the league is locked out. You cannot do anything. So I don't think they want to go to that. I don't think the owners want to go to that. I don't think the players' union want to go to that. So they would have 4 months to set up a new CBA, which is a long enough time. but they don't want to not have baseball activities going on. You wouldn't have winter meetings next week. You'd only have the minor league meetings going on. You wouldn't have anything Major League Baseball going on. So with that being said, you want to try and extend maybe the CBA just a little bit. That way you can have more time to negotiate. That way GMs and owners, while they're trying to negotiate everything, can also be trying to sign players like you saw Yoenis Cespedes signed today. I'm sure by the time I talk to you again next week, you're going to see a lot more big names getting signed. You know what I mean? It's free agency. You know, you have to try and find a way to get players in. The more and more free agents that sign, that means the less big names are out there. And the more and more teams that sign big name free agents are not going to be so highly on signing people like, I'm going to use Jose Bautista, Edwin Encarnacion, Carlos Beltran, some of these bigger free agents right now, some of these closers, Kenley Jansen, for instance. If a closer gets signed to a team that needs a closer, then that's one less team that's going to need a closer for these big-name guys. So they're not going to be as likely to go to a team that may have already signed someone. So you don't want to lock them out because then no deals can be going on. Honestly, for me, is there reason to believe that something's going to get done? Absolutely. We haven't had a lockout in baseball in 21 years. I don't think we're going to be heading towards a lockout personally. It's baseball. Like, although it's not as popular as some of these other sports, it's still $1 billion industry. They don't want to lock them out, especially when baseball's trying to move up right now. You saw the success of the World Series this past month. It's been very, very good. The World Series this year was probably better than any World Series I can remember. Honestly, it was that good. It went down to the wire that much. Ratings were off the charts. I think a lot of that has to do with the Cubs and Indians who were in it. So you have some young stars and young players to build around. You don't want to build it up and then say, oh, okay, we're done. We're locking out. We need to try and figure something out. So I don't think there's any reason to believe that's going to happen. Plus, you have about 4 months until games officially start, a couple of months before spring training. So you still have a lot of time to negotiate. And it seems like the two sides are not on totally opposite sides of the fence. It seems like they're trying to come to a conclusion and trying to come to a certain scenario that will allow us to be able to have baseball. But with all that being said, it is still a very, very scary time for baseball. We're going to have the CBA expire tonight unless they extend it for a certain amount of time. I mean, they're not going to get anything done in 11 hours that they've been trying to do for a few weeks now. We're headed towards a lockout. Will it be a very long lockout? I mean, the jury's kind of out on that. I doubt it. Like I said, you have a lot of time to negotiate until you have to have people reporting to go to spring training. But the longer you wait, then the longer you have free agents who are not going to have homes. You have people that might be signing new deals that can't go into the facilities, that can't start learning some of their teammates and getting familiar with some of their teammates. You're not going to have any of that going on. So you want to try and get this deal done as quickly as possible. And if they're making progress already, although it might not be stellar progress, although it might just be a little bit of progress, like I said earlier, some progress is better than no progress. So if you're getting something done, that's better than getting nothing done. I think they'll come to an agreement on this luxury tax, like if you're going too high on certain players and over a certain amount of money, then you have to pay a lot more. We've seen that over the last few years. Teams are not really scared on that, maybe just a little bit. It's supposed to kind of even the playing field, which, quite honestly, it doesn't. Where do you see all the big-name free agents going? You see them going to New York, to Boston, to Chicago, to San Francisco, all the big markets that have all the money and all the teams that are approaching World Series and playoffs every year. That's where the free agents are going, if the big-name ones. You know what I mean? All the guys that are top of the order, top of the pecking order, that are going to be getting new deals. So I think they'll come to a certain agreement. Like I said, what that money and what that agreement will be, I mean, who knows? I still don't know. We'll have to wait and see, but it's something will get done, I guarantee. We're not going to have a lockout where we're missing games. I really don't think that would happen. Although, in a way, you might say that might be a good thing. I feel like the baseball season is too long to begin with anyway. To me, 162 games is a lot longer than it should be. I'd maybe cut it down to 100 games. That gets you out a couple of months early with the season. That gets you finishing up right before football starts, right before basketball starts, so that way you don't have to worry about any competitive sports. You know what I mean? It would make it better. You know, baseball's ratings would go up. You have less games, so you have fans tuning in more, so every game's a lot more important. I think that'll kind of be a good thing in a way, a 100-game season, but I don't really see that happening anytime soon. But who knows? Maybe if we have a lockout and this thing drags out a super, super long time, we might have a shortened season, and then we can maybe see if that was a good thing or a bad thing. Who knows? So, I don't know, guys. But we'll take our last break at the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. After the break, just a few updates on the few things. We're going to be talking about the Comeback Player of the Year award in the American League and the National League, as well as just some smaller deals that did get signed within the past week, within the past couple of days especially, for some outfielders and some guys in the infield as well. So, we'll be right back, guys, after the break at the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So Rick Porcello won the American League Cy Young Award, and he has a little something to add to that list. He's going to be adding the American League Comeback Player of the Year Award. The Boston Red Sox pitcher, as I mentioned, 22-4, 3.15 ERA over 33 starts. Last year, he went 9-15 with a 4.92 ERA. So I guess you could say that's a pretty good comeback season. He did lead the majors with 22 victories. So he said, I think the consistency of quality strikes was the biggest improvement in my game. Just being able to do that game after game in tough situations that you encounter. I was able to stay in my delivery, stay in my head, just throw strikes. I was able to get out of situations that I wasn't getting out of in the past and minimize damage. So Porcello wins the American League Comeback Player of the Year. And in the National League, we have the Nationals' Anthony Rendon. He is your Comeback Player of the Year. He hit .270. He had 20 home runs and 85 RBIs. He had a .348 on-base percentage and a .450 slugging percentage to help the Nats win the NL East. He said, I'm not a very boastful person, but of course there are times when you're excited and happy about whether you have a good game or not. But I don't want to be that person that boasts about himself day in and day out. I try to stay away from the media as best as I can. It's going to help me humble myself and not make my head any bigger than it already is. So Anthony Rendon and Rick Porcello are your Comeback Player of the Year for the American League and the National League, respectively. A couple of guys who have pretty good seasons. It's great to see them back. All right, so now we'll transition talking about some deals that were signed within the past few days. Some guys getting deals done right before a possible lockout. So I guess it's good that they're getting things done. The first one here is the Chicago Cubs have brought in outfielder John Jay. They signed him to a one-year deal for about $8 million. He's 31 years old. He's a career .287 hitter, so a very, very good hitter. He's also really good in the field. He's got a .996 fielding percentage, which is the highest among center fielders that are active. So he spent most of his career with the Cardinals. He spent last year with the Padres. He hit .291 with 347 at-bats. So for me, this is a great deal. Obviously, it adds more depth to the Chicago Cubs outfield. Not really sure what's going to happen with Dexter Fowler, so you could see John Jay be a replacement out there in center field. You have Jason Hayward. You have Kyle Schwarber to add to the mix now after he will be healthy. So for me, this is just the rich keep getting richer. Theo Epstein continues again and again to make great, great deals. It's just a one-year deal, so it's kind of like a trial offer to see how things go. Obviously, for John Jay, he's a guy who's going to want to try and get a World Series title. So what better place to go to the defending World Series champions to have just a ton of young talent on their team? You add Jay, who's also good in the field. He's a great defender. So, I mean, that'll be really good, like, end-of-the-game situations. If he's on the bench, maybe bring him in to make sure you don't have an error or anything going on. I mean, like I said, this is a great, great acquisition. And maybe you could say he's doing maybe a little bit of a ring-chasing sort of situation. Like, you see this in a lot of sports. You see guys that are maybe on the tail end of their career, and 31's not necessarily a really, really old. He's still kind of young. But you see guys that have gotten their money in the past and are really, really focused on winning a championship. So they kind of take maybe less money than they would have gotten somewhere else to focus on trying to win a World Series, because that's the one thing that they have not accomplished in their career. I feel like there might be a little bit of a circumstance here with John Jay, but, I mean, can you really hate on the guy? Like, if you've gotten all your money in the past, you're on the tail end of your career, maybe your prime years are over in Jay's instance, but you kind of are just missing that one mantle, that one piece to really put on your sort of career milestone, and it's that championship, and that's what you go for. And, of course, you're going to go for a team that has a chance of winning, and the Cubs, honestly, favorites to repeat again. So, I mean, I guess you can't really hate on them. So, kudos to John Jay and the Cubs. I think it's a great acquisition. It's a very good move. Another outfielder is making his way to a new team, and he will be on his fourth team in the last 4 years, and that's a 2-year deal for $11 million for outfielder Matt Joyce. He has signed with the Oakland Athletics. Played with the Pirates last year. He hit .242 with 13 home runs and 42 RBIs in 293 plate appearances. So he didn't really get up to the plate that much, kind of in a pitch hitter and a rotational player role. But, I mean, he's a decent player. I mean, his best season came in Tampa Bay, where he played for about 6 years. He was his all-star in 2011. He had a .277 average, 19 home runs, 75 RBIs. He's got a little bit of a speed, 13 steals that year. So he's kind of old. He's about 32 years now. But the A's make a move, which you don't really see. You don't see the A's making too many free agents. A lot of the times they sort of build up their young talent and then kind of ship them out of town because they just simply can't afford to pay them like some of these other clubs can. But the A's do bring in Matt Joyce, like I said, a 2-year, $11 million deal to play out there in the outfield. And the Brewers have found a replacement for slugger Chris Carter. Chris Carter did lead the majors in home runs with 41. They have signed Eric Thames to a 3-year deal. He's also got a club option for the 4th year, which is in 2020. This was reported yesterday. He said, "I'm honored to be here. The last 2 or 3 years ago, I had no idea where I was and it had in store for me, and I'm very fortunate that the Brewers organization looked at me with hope and belief in me and my talent." So they need a guy who can sort of swing the bat. Thames is 30 years old. He's got a .348 average over the past 3 seasons in the Korean baseball organization. So he's not really doing it in the majors, but he's a guy who's capable of hitting. You know what I mean? I guess, he's also got 124 home runs in his sort of career there. He hit 40 home runs and had 40 stolen bases in a season in the Korean League. So I guess you can't really hate on him, although he's not doing it in the majors. So you're going to have a big, big step up in competition and pitching-wise and all that stuff. But I guess it's a deal that I'm kind of looking forward to. I want to see what he can do. Obviously, doing so good in Korea, have to see if he can do it in the majors. He is a left-hander, so I guess that is a little bit of a benefit. You don't see too many big, strong, powerful left-handers out there that are capable of swinging the bat. Plus, you have the advantage if you have a right-handed pitcher. So I guess it's not a bad deal. He did play with Toronto and with Seattle in the majors a couple of years ago, and he was capable of hitting home runs, 21 home runs, 82 RBIs. He was hitting .250 before he jumped to Korea in 2013. So a guy who's capable of playing in the majors, obviously did it for a few years, but he hasn't done it in the past 3. So I think there might be a little bit of a drop-off, kind of maybe a little early season struggles, trying to get back up to speed with some of the starting pitching in the major leagues as opposed to the Korean League. No disrespect to the Korean League, but it's not Major League Baseball. All the top players are here in the United States and Canada. They're not over in Korea. So I guess I'll have to wait and see how Thames can do. It's a good move for the Brewers. They do have to find a replacement for Chris Carter, who's not going to be back. So I guess it's like a deal that's not worth too much, $15 million guaranteed. And then they have the option the 4th year, if it's not working out, they can always get rid of him. So I guess it's like a low risk, high reward kind of situation. So I guess you can say it's not a bad deal. We'll have to wait and see where it can go for the Brewers, a team that did not do too well in the NL Central last year. All right, guys, this is going to end the show today. I feel like we did a really good job. Yoenis Cespedes gets his new deal. The CBA edging closer and closer. Just, now we're looking at 11 hours. It's not looking good. I really do think that we're heading for at least a small lockout, or maybe they'll extend it a little bit while they negotiate, but a deal will get done. And then, speaking of deals, all these other guys get deals. John Jay, Matt Joyce, Eric Thames. It's great to see a lot of guys getting deals done right before a possible lockout, because if we do get locked out, they won't have a chance at all to get any deals done. So, we'll have to wait and see how things go. But anyways, guys, my name is Ben Brown for Jeremiah, who's not here. He's sick today. This is us signing off at the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. Hope you enjoyed the show. We will be back next week to talk all things baseball right here at the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.